want to welcome you guys to the Democrats of Greater Tucson's Monday show. My name is Trey Devon. I'm a board member at large for DGT. Please, everybody, give it up for the wonderful Deja Foxx.
Hey y'all, my name is Deja Foxx, and I want to say thank you for having me. Groups like yours are so important in a moment like this where we need to be building community, coming together, organizing, having the conversations that matter. This administration is attempting to rule by fear. They want us to stay quiet and they want us to stay separate, and gatherings like this are how we are going to get out of this mess. And now, with that being said, I'd love to tell you a little bit about my personal story, what brings me to this work, and what brings me to this race here in Southern Arizona, Congressional District 7. I was born and raised here in Tucson. I was raised by a single mom, and my mom did every odd job that you could imagine. She delivered flowers for a florist. She worked at a post office, and I would hang out in the back room during the summers. She cleaned houses. She was a caregiver for the elderly, and she was a mom. Being a single mom is a full-time gig. It was a lot to carry. And in moments where she was out of work, I saw the ways that my community came together to make enough. Those are my very first organizing memories. I remember seeing, when my mom was out of work, the ways that she might volunteer to babysit for a neighbor. And they would pick up an extra shift. And because of it, they might have gas in their car and they'd offer me a ride to school in the morning. And while that doesn't sound like the politics that we hear in press releases or on the news, I am telling you that that kind of organizing, knowing your neighbor, plugging in and supporting is political. I grew up in Section 8 housing. I relied on SNAP benefits or food stamps to have dinner on the table, and Medicaid to go to the doctors when I needed a physical to play sports in school, or when I was sick. Those are my first introductions to policy. I lived it. I knew what it felt like when we made just a little too much money one year and were left uninsured, or when SNAP benefits got cut and it meant having less food on the table. I was a free lunch kid in our public schools here in Tucson, and knew even then that policy mattered for a young person like me. I could feel the differences in election season. And so when folks ask me how I got into politics, I often share that I didn't pick politics, politics picked me. I have lived the policies that people in DC debate. It is a different kind of experience to bring to this work. It is a different level of accountability. My mom is still on Medicaid. She got a skin cancer diagnosis this year, and it was scary. But because we had reliable access to healthcare through Medicaid, we were able to get it addressed, and no one in our family is in medical debt because of it. My best friend works with children with disabilities, and she is one car breakdown away every month from not making rent. I know what it feels like to make hard decisions in the grocery checkout line, or to have to pick between my back to school clothes and my bills. When I was just 15 years old, my mom was struggling with addiction. It's a story that is true for so many of our loved ones, right? And it was incredibly difficult to navigate. But while she was going through a rehabilitation process, I was left on my own. And like 1 in 30 teens here in the US, I experienced hidden homelessness. It looked like bouncing around between friends' houses until eventually I moved in with my boyfriend at the time and his family, two incredible Mexican immigrants over here in the South Side. The father was a landscaper and the mom cleaned houses. And these are folks who did not have a whole lot extra to give, but found a place for me in their home. That is something that our country and people like Donald Trump could learn a little something about from immigrants like them. And at the very same time, I was navigating the sex education curriculum taught to me at University High School, where I went to school. Um, a curriculum last updated in the 80s that didn't mention consent, was medically inaccurate. Now, what we are talking is personal story, but I will remind you that it is also policy. It was the policy of my school that my baseball coach could skip through a PowerPoint on contraceptives and tell us, your parents are going to talk to you about this, while I sat there, a teenager, knowing that there was no one at home to fill in these gaps for me and that I needed the information most. And now you could ask anybody in my family, my older sisters, my mom. I have always been the kind of young person, even as a kid, who had a deep sense of right and wrong, the kind of person to say, this isn't fair. And I sat in that classroom knowing that this was wrong, not just for me, but that there were other young people, other peers, friends in classes not getting the information they needed to be successful. And so I started showing up to school board meetings. The very first one I went to, I had my personal story all written out on a Post-it note. And for anyone in this room who's ever been a teenage girl, you know that one of the scariest things to do is admit that things are not normal for you, right? All you want to be is normal. And so standing up at community call, while 5 school board members sat on a raised dais and looked down at me, and 3 reporters that were paid to be there and honestly probably wanted to go home were in the audience, I was nervous. My hands were shaking as I told my story for the very first time, that there was nobody at home to fill in these gaps for me, that I had to live with my boyfriend out of need, and that this curriculum was doing wrong by me. This was a curriculum that school board members, one of whom I'm running against now, had decades to fix and failed to, until a young person like me started showing up, telling my story, organizing and demanding better. And over the course of 6 months, I asked my friends to come along, to join me, my peers, my teachers, and they did. We packed the auditorium, and 6 months later, we won a unanimous vote to rewrite the curriculum in Southern Arizona's largest school district. I sat on that review board as an appointed member by the school board for over a year, helping to rewrite that curriculum. And at the very same time, I worked shifts at the gas station to make ends meet, the Quick Trip on 22nd and Alvernon, if anyone cares. I cleaned toilets for $10 an hour. I worked hard in my AP classes to be the first in my family to go to college. I worked a second job at the El Rio clinics, where I was a peer sex educator, where I helped young people decide on what kind of birth control was right for them, walk them through their options for reproductive care. And I went toe to toe with the Trump administration. I didn't stop organizing after the school board, I scaled up. I went toe to toe with Senator Jeff Flake and other Republicans when they voted to defund Planned Parenthood centers here in Southern Arizona. And that's because I got care at a Planned Parenthood when I had no parents, no money, and no insurance. And I walked out with the birth control I needed at no cost to me to take control of my body and my future. It made it possible for me to be the first in my family to go to college. And I told them so. I showed up at a town hall for Senator Jeff Flake back in 2017. And this was when Republicans still hosted town halls. And I asked him if birth control was helping me to be successful, reach for higher education, why he would deny me the American dream. I woke up the next day and millions of people had seen that video. It was my very first viral video. It married good organizing, grassroots organizing, with smart digital strategy, because I'm a part of the generation who came of age online. And overnight, a 16-year-old girl working at the gas station, living with her boyfriend out of need, experiencing homelessness, was on even footing in the public discourse with the United States Senator. And I carry that confidence with me and that knowledge into this race, where I am up against the odds, right? There are people in this race who inherited a legacy last name and donor list, an advantage I will just never have, who are taking corporate PAC money, something I won't do. But we have built a movement over the past few months. We got into this race on April 2nd, and since, over 15,000 people have pitched in what they can to make this run possible. Our average contribution is less than $28, and we have raised nearly $500,000 to stay competitive, because people all across this country and right here in Southern Arizona know that we need leaders who represent our lived experiences, who are a new generation, not just in age, I'm 25. I'd be the youngest member and the first woman of my generation, Gen Z, elected to Congress. But in our experiences, that we need a new generation of working class leaders. And I'm telling you, it's not easy to be in this race. It's an uphill fight, whether that's because of how expensive it is to run, how prohibitive it is for young people and working class folks, or how dangerous it can be to be a young woman in politics. And so I want you to know that I am in this race because I have a deep sense of responsibility. I know that Donald Trump has been running for president for the last decade, has characterized the political understanding of my generation and the generations that come after. But I also know that there will be a time after Donald Trump, and that it will take young people like us to define who we will be as a party and a country in the days ahead. And we have an opportunity to make history here in Southern Arizona in the next month or so. Send a new generation of working class leaders, the youngest member of Congress, first woman of my generation, to DC. And with that, I know we're at about the halfway point, and I'd love to open it up to questions.
Well, we absolutely appreciate that, Deja. I'm gonna open up the chat to questions. Mike Bryan's gonna be moderating
Cool.
our chat room. Please use your little hand icon if you have a question. I had a question though, Deja.
Go for it.
Just you were really highlighting your experience with your education and the challenges that you were facing when you were going through like your sex ed classes.
Mhm.
How big is education for you? And if you were to get in that office, what are some of your kind of specific points for education?
Yeah. Like I said, I am a product of our public schools here in Southern Arizona, proudly. My teachers, right? I was raised by a single mom who had to work um, often long hours, and my teachers were so often like my second parent. They
Mm,
are also the people who raised me. And we need to treat our teachers with respect, pay them a fair, livable wage. When I was in high school, I supported the Red for Ed movement. I walked out, I spoke on stages and stood up for the educators who stood up for me every day. And the way that I would govern as an elected official, as your congressperson, is not just by checking the boxes in DC. You have my word that I would continue to be an activist, to stand alongside folks here in our community, right? Our teachers and our educators. So that's one piece. The second piece is that we need to fund Title I schools, places where young people like me, right, particularly Black, Brown, low income students, are getting their educations because this is the main driver of economic opportunity. Our platform, our vision for our policies is that people deserve more than to just get by, they deserve a shot at getting ahead. Public education made that possible for me. I went on to be the first in my family to go to college. I earned a full ride from Columbia University, where I walked across the stage, the first in my family to go to college. And I was a Pell Grant recipient, right? Something that's on the line right now. We need to protect that funding so that way young people, no matter where their parents are from or how much money they make, have an opportunity to get ahead, to
yeah,
invest their potential back in their communities. And the final thing that I'll add here is that we see at the University of Arizona attacks on things like DEI,
yeah.
right? So-called DEI,
Mhm.
where our cultural centers are not just at risk, but under attack. And we were the only campaign to make a stop at the University of Arizona, register voters, pass out literature and canvas during passing periods. We held a town hall or a listening session in the underground at the African American Student Union
Ooh,
before
wow.
people graduated. And so we have done the hard work to engage young people on our campuses in this race where other people are counting them out because they're not high propensity voters
Mhm.
who deserve focus in a special election primary. But we know that in a district that hasn't seen a competitive congressional in 22 years, basically your lifetime, basically my lifetime, that young people need to be at the center of this conversation.
100%. Well, I appreciate that answer.
Yeah.
I see we have Patricia with her hand up.
Hey, Pat.
Hi there, Deja. So, could you comment on your service, board service for Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's where you and I met. I served on the board of Planned Parenthood Arizona as a teenager from, I believe, 2016 to 2018, maybe 2017 to 2018. And these were some really difficult years. Donald Trump made good on his promise, right? He campaigned on defunding Planned Parenthood, something that he is taking into the second run, right? And so when I was on the board of Planned Parenthood, I was able to offer an advocate's perspective, right? Someone who's on the ground with the bullhorn every week, who's tabling and talking to community members, who was also notably a Planned Parenthood patient and Title X recipient. I was able to give voice to those experiences in a room full of people making incredibly difficult decisions on budget and leadership. And I see a parallel between that experience of being a young person, standing up, sharing my experience, being vulnerable, and giving voice to the people we serve. I see a direct parallel to the kind of congressperson that I would be. We need people who are representative of the people we serve. And when I go on to Congress, protecting social services isn't just a talking point for me, I've lived it. Protecting reproductive rights isn't something I would just check the boxes on, I would be a champion because I know and have lived good policy. And so it was so incredible to meet so many of our Tucson community, get to know you all over those years of board service as we navigated Title X cuts, birth control cut funding, and give voice to that lived experience in the room. I also want to share that my work on behalf of Planned Parenthood didn't stop there. Planned Parenthood has been my political home for a whole lot longer. Um, and it's hard to believe that we are further behind in some ways than when I started. Um, Roe versus Wade was overturned in 2023. And in its wake, it left a generation of women, Gen Z, the first generation of women to have less rights than our mothers and our grandmothers. It is a different kind of urgency that I bring to this work. And it's why I'm not scared to risk something. After the overturn of Roe versus Wade, I was arrested on Capitol Hill, protesting alongside movement leaders, including the presidents of places like Planned Parenthood, because I know that the job is changing for congressional members, for movement leaders, for activists. It requires, under this administration that is throwing rules out the window, that we be willing to risk something, and I am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think Mike Bryan had his hand up.
Hey, Mike.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for bringing this to life and making sure that we were able to get this on the schedule. I so appreciate your
That's
coordinating.
what we do, of course. So we got a couple questions in the chat. First of all,
Okay.
Carolyn Klassen would like to know what your position is on the Israeli-Gaza war, and I guess now the Israeli-Iran war also. So if you could speak about that.
Yeah. I mean, my generation, Gen Z, has been politicized by this issue. And I know for generations older, this is something that you could see parallels in, right? Whether that was the Vietnam War or other conflicts. I want to make sure that we bring this conversation back into district, that we are protecting the First Amendment rights of our students and our educators and our activists. But as we look overseas, it is clear to me that though Israel has the right to exist and defend itself, that things have gone way too far, that this is unconscionable. And I would oppose funding for weapons that would be used to harm civilians, disproportionately women and children, right? And at a time, mind you, in one of the richest countries in the world, where women and children right here at home lack health care, our neighbors are unhoused, people struggle just to make their rent and put food on the table, and yet we have money, unending blank checks for war. That is unconscionable. And so I would put a hard foot down on our funding because I believe that our budget is a moral document.
Hmm.
And, I'll add this as well.
Sure.
That as we look toward peace, which we must have an eye on the future, right? A two-state solution is the way toward peace, and that includes Palestinian statehood.
I do have a question of my own, if you don't mind, Trey.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Mike, you're allowed to ask questions too, even if you're the voice of the chat.
Yeah.
So one of the things that has been discussed a lot about you is that, you know, you're younger, you're savvy on social media. You've been called an influencer. That's what I would call a public citizen. You know, I think you should pivot on that every time you hear that word.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I want to know, you know, a lot of people think that social media has roughened and coarsened and cheapened, shallowed the quality of our political discourse. How would you counter that aspect, and how do you view using social media as an organizing tool and as a tool for organizing people politically and engaging them on a deeper level than just, you know, clickbait and rage bait and, you know,
Mike, you're letting me put my strategist hat on, which is where my natural habitat is. I want to take you back to that story I told you about when I was 16. And I stood up to Senator Jeff Flake, right? A leading Republican at the time, a senator, a sitting senator. Again, put yourself in my shoes. A 16-year-old working at Quick Trip who was experiencing the other end of the policies he voted on, debated on. He had voted to take away my birth control funding, make it impossible for me to afford the ability to take control of my body and my future, put a roadblock between me and being the first in my family to go to college. And I showed up at that town hall, right? The most sort of democratic institution, and we're talking about the quality of our political discourse here. I showed up at that town hall and had an ability to voice my question to him, share my perspective. But what I think is incredibly important to note here is that overnight, millions of people watched that video and put me on even footing with him in the public discourse. It is why the next day, CNN asked me to go live and talk to them about my story. It is why in the weeks following, I was able to go to DC, lobby on Capitol Hill, and sit across from members of Congress and the Senate and share my personal story, give voice and name and face to the things that they were voting on, right, against my reproductive care. And I want you to view social media in this way, because I recognize that for our generation, we grew up on it. It's where we came of age. It's where we've made some of our best friends, where we're building our political understanding, but that might not be true for so many of the folks on this call. But I want you to see that social media, for all of its flaws, and there are many, we saw the people seated behind Donald Trump at his inauguration, and they represent a class of people that are putting their thumb on the scales on our social media platforms. But I see the promise of the internet. An internet that has allowed me to have voice in our political discourse, right? Change the narrative, change culture, stand on even footing with a United States senator, and now to be able to be in this race, right? It is incredibly expensive to run for Congress. I told you we've raised about $500,000, and that is possible because of good storytelling and social media. We are going into those social media spaces, communicating with people that there is a candidate that they can get hopeful about, that they can see themselves in, and it's speaking to them, right? It takes a whole lot of $28 donations to make a campaign like this happen, but we are doing it because we have social media to lean on. And I want to say that allows us to strengthen our democratic process, because we are not reliant on big dollar donors. We don't take billionaire money. We don't take corporate PAC money, because we are funded in the 99% by small dollar donors. That is who we are accountable to. And so things are changing. There's no doubt. And we are showing that a different way of doing politics is possible. And that these videos, these views, those likes, those shares are not just numbers on a screen. Each and every one of those are people who engaged with our story and our message and our political process. Every single one of those shares is a conversation started with a friend or a family member about this election. Every save is someone who wants to come back and engage with this process again. And so I encourage you all to see it that way. I think we have time for one more, and I see two hands up. Maybe I can take both at the same time and try to combine them into one response. Is that okay?
Let's see if we can. Absolutely. Let's see if we can. Well, Andre, if you want to unmute yourself and then ask your question, then if Mike, you want to ask yours after Andrea, we'll see if Deja can answer them both.
Maybe we'll have a mind meld and you'll have the same question.
There you go.
I don't know if can I be heard?
We can hear
And
you.
I can't
You
hear
are
you.
heard.
Okay, I can't hear you guys, but you can hear me. Hi. In CD7 debate, you said we must talk about age. And you mentioned that you thought the Democratic Party was not recruiting younger candidates often enough, although that hasn't been my experience in Pima County.
Sure.
Why do you think that? First of all, how do you know this is true, that they have not been recruiting younger candidates specifically? And why do you think that age is an impediment to good leadership? Thank you.
Brian, I'll let you ask your question as well, and I'll try to answer them both together.
Okay, well, my question sort of related. I mean, I was just going to ask how comfortable you feel you're going to get the younger vote out in this election.
That's a good question, and I'm glad that these two combine. Andrea, right, is the first asker, right? To be clear, Andrea, I never said that age was an impediment to leadership. What I pointed out is the fact, the undeniable fact, that we have 3 vacancies on the Democratic side in the House of Representatives because our members of Congress have passed away, unfortunately, while still in office, while in their seats. That leaves vacancies. As it stands, hundreds of thousands of people in Congressional District 7, our friends, our neighbors, people like my mom, have no representative in Congress fighting for them under one of the most cruel and heartbreaking administrations, who's attempting in the most recent budget bill, which passed by a single vote, to take healthcare away from millions, to take food off the tables of their most vulnerable families through cuts to SNAP benefits, right? Attempting to defund places like Planned Parenthood. And so what I ask you to do is just the math. We have 3 vacancies, 3 members who unfortunately have passed away, 3 Democrats in the House of Representatives, leaving vacancies at one of the most crucial political moments of our history. And we have seen the consequences, a budget bill that passed by a single vote. And families like mine are already dealing with the consequences, right? Already living with that reality, that they could see cuts to their health care or food on their table, their most basic needs. And so with that in mind, I ask us to have a hard conversation about age in this party, right? It is because we have yet to have that conversation that we see vacancies like these. We need to be having succession planning. We need, as a party, to bring in a new generation of leaders who are willing to go into social media and new media spaces because we know them, places where the right is running circles around us, and do things a little differently. You know, this is the point I'm asking us to make. And Brian, I want to get to your question now, which is, how do we know that we can turn out young people? And I want to just share some numbers with you. We all saw the televised debate, I imagine. You know, folks plugged in and watched that first debate on TV. We shared the clips on social media, and 10 million people tuned in. 10 million watched the clips of our debate on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. We are, by definition, and truly have the numbers to back it up, that we are bringing people into this process, right? And I've had the opportunity to do the math, look at the percentage of those views that were here in district. Over 100,000 people in Tucson and Phoenix, cities in district, watched those debate clips on TikTok alone. We are bringing people into this conversation around this election because we're willing to go into the places that other people aren't. And I want to share with you a statistic, which is that 39% of adults under 30 here in the United States are getting their news on TikTok. That's an entire generation of people who are building their political understanding on this platform. And we can't ignore it, right? Not if we're going to have a future for our party and a party for my generation, Gen Z, to inherit. And like I said, it doesn't just stop on the screens. We made the time to go out to the college campus, to the University of Arizona, do high traffic canvases during passing periods, sit in the basement, the undergrounds of the African American Student Center. And so we have made that commitment doubly online and on the ground, and we're seeing it pay off. Every canvas launch, there is somebody at our volunteers who has never volunteered for a political campaign before. And I know you all are seasoned volunteers. And I want to ask you, how many times do you show up to a volunteer event, you know, a door knock or a canvas, and see people who have never volunteered before? Every canvas, we see people who have never knocked doors, never volunteered for a candidate. And that speaks to the ways we're bringing people into this party and into this process.
Well, Deja, I think that's all the time that Deja can lend to us. We really, really appreciate you coming on.
Sure.
It's always a pleasure to hear from you. I think you're definitely doing a lot to like I said before, pave the way for some of these younger people who are just starting to pop up. So, of course, we
Yeah,
appreciate that. Anything you'd
absolutely.
like to say before you depart?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just say this, that I am not running only because I am young, right? To represent the 1 in 5 members of my generation, 1 in 5 Americans is Gen Z. And yet we have a single member of Congress. That's a real representation issue. Um, I am also running because, and I want to share, I'm a stories gal. A story I had of a conversation I had at a door, because I knock my own doors. I talked to a woman who was probably in her 70s or 80s, and she told me that she was scared right now, that her generation, your generation maybe, fought for Roe versus Wade, right? Remembered a time before, and that she felt that she had let our generation down. And I took her by the hands, and her eyes were filled with tears. And I told her, as I will tell you, that so many of you and the things you fought for have made it possible for someone like me, young, working class, to be the first in my family to go to college, right? To make this run for office possible. And to you, I am grateful, but it doesn't just stop at gratitude. You have my promise that I will keep your fight alive, right? That though it's scary right now, and we have seen so many of the things that generations prior have fought for being overturned by this administration, there will be days after, and it will take folks in my generation, Gen Z, to lead us forward. And I'm grateful for the work you have done, and I want to provide you the assurance that we are ready to take that torch on and keep the fight alive. So thank you all. Make sure you +1 your vote, that you get out there and get your ballot in, but that you ask somebody else to do it too. That's how we're going to get this done.
Again, Deja, we appreciate you so much. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please go check out Deja Fox's her social media accounts. I'm pretty sure they're all at Deja Foxx or at Deja Foxx for Congress. Check out her website. Do what you can to support. Please check us out on our website, thedgt.org. Check out our social media accounts at the Democrats of Greater Tucson. At our meetings, we try to speak with candidates on a weekly basis, office holders, public policy experts, to help our members and the public participate in informed democracy. You can find us at thedgt.org, or you can look us up on Instagram or Facebook, the Democrats of Greater Tucson. We are a membership-based club and a political action committee with a 50-year track record in promoting democratic values in our Greater Tucson community. Apart from our weekly forums like this one, we hold a monthly in-person happy hour to provide our members and public with access to political conversation and to encourage, engage, or to encourage and engage with the democratic process and our own government. So again, please visit us at thedgt.org. Please visit our social medias to learn more about our upcoming events and to browse some of our past events. If you are open to it, we definitely always appreciate your support. I like to say that politics doesn't pay, but it's certainly not free. Our mission is to provide people with a better democracy, and that does come with some financial stipulations. So if you're interested in becoming a member, it is just $24 a year. And you can contact me or Mike Bryant if you're interested in that. I hope you guys all take care, and I'll be seeing you all soon.